Okay, so one of the things that is really important to us as farmers is the way that we take care of our soil. And I wanted to talk just briefly about that. So you're seeing some different soil management practices here. And one thing you're probably noticing is that the soil looks generally pretty healthy. There's a lot of deep, dark color to the soils. The darker the soils, often that indicates that there's a lot of organic matter, which means those soils are storing a lot of carbon, which is really good. And we're also seeing here some really amazing crops. And in the background, again, you can see Max and Franny doing some work on the farm. But one of the things I want to talk about is that this farm is right now operating about 1.5 acres of vegetable production. The gross sales of the farm are probably going to be, the sales of vegetables in gross dollars from the farm are going to be somewhere around $60,000 this year, maybe $50,000 to $60,000, which is about half what we normally do in a year. And in a normal year, we're growing on about 2.5 acres of ground. So Max and Franny are managing a smaller amount of acreage, but it's just the two of them. So just the two of them are doing almost all the work that it takes to run this farm, and almost all that work is being done by hand. And so it's really important to talk a little bit about that. How is this approach to agriculture, which is high intensive, a ton of productivity per unit area, how is this approach different than the approach that an industrial scale farm might be taking? So there's a couple of really important differences that I really want to highlight. And one is, you'll see there's some weeds in the pathways. There's some weeds around, like things that aren't crops are weeds. You can probably tell. I'm sure you guys got this.
These beautiful cabbages,
Not
weeds.
weeds. But there's still a lot of weeds. There's a lot of what we call weed pressure, and weed pressure, it's like a tidal wave. It's always over your head because you have to get weeds out of the field before they go to seed, or else you're creating a really big problem for the following year. And sometimes it can be very stressful. And so when we think about managing the crops that we're growing, we have to think about how we're managing the weeds. On this farm, we have the options of hoeing. So hoeing is a very good weed management strategy. Of not having weeds, having soil that just doesn't grow any weeds. That would be great. We can't exactly have that, but we have a new system here on this farm for how to manage weeds, which is essentially that system. So we have, you don't see any right now because they're all folded away, but we have these large black tarps that we've been laying out on the soil, over the top of the soil all winter. So underneath the tarps, it's warm, and the weeds germinate because they want to grow because it's warm. And then there's no sunlight and they all die. And so we take back the soil. And if we don't disturb the soil, all of the weed seeds that were in that soil right at the surface have already germinated, and we can plant directly into the bed and have a much cleaner experience with much fewer weeds. So that's a sort of organic management strategy, which is really new and very exciting and has made a big difference to the farm this year. So in the fall last year, we invested in 6 big silage tarps, and they've really transformed the landscape of the farm. So we're trying to reduce as much as possible what we call tillage, and that's the work of flipping the soil and messing around with the tractor. None of the farm that Franny and Max are managing this year has seen a tractor. This has all been done by hand. That's intense, an intense amount of labor. And that's something I just really want to highlight. When people talk about sustainably growing food as costing more, it does cost more, because when we approach the work of this farm with our own 2 hands, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of labor. And in order to keep costs down, there is a whole underside to organic food production. A lot of our organic food production is being done, the actual labor of that food production is being done by migrant, immigrant laborers who are laboring in very poor conditions for very minuscule wages. They don't have a lot of legal protections. Often they don't have the right to unionize. And right now, in this era of the pandemic, those are the people on the front lines having to go to work and being exposed to the virus because of the working conditions and the difficulty of maintaining social distance in a field setting, where you're often having to work head to head quickly and rapidly in the field. So one of the things that's really important for us to think about, and especially this question of how do we decolonize the food system, one way that we can do that is to have a lot of small farmers, right? Because there's no way that a large farm can be this productive per unit area, because in order to manage the farm at this level of productivity, we have to have physical humans doing this work. We could grow all of these vegetables on a tractor farm as well, but the space between the vegetables would have to be a lot bigger in order for tractors to do the work. And even if tractors can do the work of cultivating, only humans can do the work of harvesting. You can never have a machine harvest a head of lettuce or make a bunch of collards or even harvest broccoli. So the next time you go to the store, it's really important to be thinking about the hands that have been at work to bring that harvest to your table.
Yeah, I went strawberry picking yesterday with my kids, and it was a good reminder for all of us, especially them, right? Like, strawberries don't pick themselves. It's actually a lot of work. You have to get down on the ground and pick strawberries. We picked, I think, 14 pounds of berries. It took over an hour and gave us some perspective. So I think that's good. Thanks, Eli.
Yeah, awesome.